The skeleton is on fire.
The octopus has oddly shaped feet.
The octopus has oddly...
Barley.
Bourbon, bourbon, bourbon.
Scotch. I love scotch.
Scotch tastes so good when I'm at work.
I'd say we just watch that. And let's cancel this.
Yeah. And then we just do comments.
Are those Steelers socks?
I have to go
Or is that a
to
Steelers sock?
No, those are just socks.
I like the
Brown
shoes.
Thanks. Vegas.
Are we live? So we're streaming? Okay.
It's this live stream
No.
Oh, Jesus.
No, yeah. We're live on my MySpace account.
Oh, good.
Oh, he made a MySpace joke last night too.
I love MySpace jokes.
It was MySpace and it was a pair.
Something I was going to bring it back.
Dogster? Friendster?
No.
No, it was a.
Oh, what was it? I can't remember. I'll remember.
No.
What was your first social media account?
Facebook, and I was at downtown Bentonville. I didn't do any social media before that.
Oh, well.
Daniel sold. He used Western and
MySpace.
Union to
Yes,
maximum effect.
I used to
Telegram.
write letters in dove's blood on papyrus.
Yeah.
Back in the day. Yep. And I had to make my own papyrus sheets.
Were the Dubs local?
Always.
Okay, good.
Yes.
As long as you didn't get your Dubs on
I am
Amazon.
letter to pen, is what it is.
All right. Well, welcome to ANCO.
Thank you.
Dan. We're joined by Dan Hintz of the Velocity Group,
That's correct.
but also DNA in Place. Is that the same thing?
Well, Velocity Group is the company. DNA Place is my handle, and that's part of my IP, like how I
Okay.
approached my work.
Got it.
Yep.
So it's like people call us Build with Yard, but we're
Yes.
really Yard and Company.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Just to confuse our customers is really what it's all
It's
about.
good marketing.
It is, isn't it?
Because then they're like, what is this? And they try to learn more, and then some of them make it through their frustration.
When
to
they're
contact us.
curious, we inform.
But the name is passive. It is a thing. It's kind of monolithic. But then the handle is a call to action.
That's right. But Velocity already talks about movement. So, we're constantly in movement. That's why they don't know where we are. They can't find us. Which doesn't
Talk
always
about
work
that.
as a business.
Talk about that as a business
Yeah,
practice.
that's right. That's great.
So we have found you.
Yes. That's great.
And I was
pin you
thinking-
down. It's hard to.
I got some things I want to talk about, but I'm trying to think. I'm just now thinking about when did we first meet? Why did we first meet? I mean, we've spent some time together through CNU, which is what's happening here, which is why you're here.
Yeah.
We did the trip to Memphis or to CNU Louisville with
Yeah,
Tommy,
with Tommy.
from here.
Yeah.
Hung out here with a couple others. But what was the original?
Well, I don't know how the discovery process worked, but we were just talking about this.
Here's your book.
Playbook launched in 2016.
Oh, you were one of our first Playbook.
First
buyers.
out of market buys, but not only that,
That's what it was.
first massive order.
First what?
Massive order.
Yeah, we ordered like 20 of them and handed
Yeah.
them out to people.
Yeah.
And I will give full credit to Aaron
Yeah.
Shelton, who's
And we needed the money then, so thank you.
good. Yeah, I'm glad. Feed your children.
Yeah,
it was great.
We
We went straight to the bar.
Yeah, we spent on booze.
Well, that's how you feed your creative
We
soul.
were irresponsible.
Like a
back
nice
then. We would
bar.
never do that today.
That's good. But yeah, that was the first introduction, and I think what's been so great watching your guys' trajectory. I was just saying earlier to Joe that you guys are one of those companies that I aspired to be when I grew up. I mean, just the fact that your rebrand and what you do and your approach.
I feel like coming from you, it's kind of an insult.
Oh, yes.
You're like calling us grown-ups.
No, just maybe a bigger brother, perhaps. But I think that there's we meet, and that's the other thing about the playbook, is that it resonated with me because it put into language some of the work that I was doing in a great way. And since then, it's been really fun to watch the parallels of both of our work.
Yeah.
We seem to approach things similarly in our philosophy, but it manifests differently. And so it's been really fun to watch.
Well, and one of the and to return the favor, you're very kind to say that. But one of the things that's been really fun to watch about you is your out of domain thinking. That it's just as fun to watch your planning and strategy practice as it is what you're doing in the kitchen and with the shops and the development and the beer garden and everything. It's just so fun.
Yeah.
And lends so much credibility to your approach, and you're living it, and
Yeah.
it's infectious.
Thanks. I think what's interesting, you're talking about this as well, is that this is an academic to us, which is another reason why I think we resonate, is that we do and we think about this stuff and we inspire, hopefully, other people to think, but there's a difference between collective wisdom and expertise. And I think you guys, we talked about what is that big skill set that you need in this work is insatiable curiosity, which means that you're not an expert, you have your experiences and that's what you're bringing to the table, and then you invite all of this engagement and excitement, and that's what pops out, right?
Yeah, we have the same, it was very similar core philosophies around what's wrong with our industry, what's wrong with planning, and what could be better. And I think your company was born out of that, ours was born out of that. But also, we were talking a bit earlier about doing versus planning, or doing and planning, and having this circular relationship as a firm with building things and managing our pop-up storefront or building out our garage, and how that kind of feeds and makes us even more creative and better at the consulting work, and the consulting work makes us better at building and doing, and you kind of have that same DNA.
Yeah, well, I'm a kinesthetic learner, right? I mean, I can read and I'm an insatiable reader, but I'm also a kinesthetic
I'd like you to
learner.
prove that before we're done today.
Yeah, I've got
can read?
4 or 5 books in my bag right now.
That's not proving it.
Yeah, but well, they're marked and I have some notes. Is that still not proven?
I would like you to read out loud.
Yes.
That's right.
I just want you to prove that books on tape aren't your only media.
But I think that's the other thing that we resonate. I think that when we first started having conversations, the fact that you were an executive director of an organization, I was an executive director of an organization.
Right.
Like there was a lot of similarities in our background and experiences. When you guys were talking about developing buildings and doing other things, I was just sort of beginning to dabble in development, which is the reason why I have the eye twitch now 6 years later. But at the same point, if you're in the space actually doing, and then someone who's also a practitioner brings up these challenges, well, guess what? You can address them in real time. You've risked, you've lost sometimes, you've won sometimes, and to sit in a table of doers, this is not an academic equation. And that's part of what I find tough about this discussion sometimes, is that why aren't plans implemented is because they're an academic equation. 4 times, let's get together, let's put dots on a map, let's do this, here's the implementation, and you bounce. And you're like, but you're not leaving an infrastructure of doing behind.
That's funny you say that. So I just got out of a discussion with Ottawa and Millersburg, and the last question couldn't have been teed up any better. Was about, this session is about master plans and small communities, but not once have you described what a master plan is. And it launched us into this interesting conversation about what is the product.
Right.
And the book, or the report, or the thing that the industry traditionally associates with the deliverable, the biggest downfall of the industry is that that's the end of it, or that is the thing. And it's really the muscle memory, the approach, the energy, the doing, that's the deliverable. That's what leads to Ottawa being able to say 18 months after the plan was done that they've got so much in the ground, because they developed a new powering system, and that's the product. And I think that's where the industry fully has.
And there is no end point.
Yeah,
That's right.
There's no,
it's an ing,
There's no
which
end
means
points.
it's an active
There's no
verb
end point
forever
to
and
a
always.
place changing and growing.
Yeah.
So it also implies that there's an end, and there's no end. It's an industry that should be process oriented, not product oriented.
Right. Now you certainly need deliverables for a lot of different reasons.
Sure.
Those milestones and those things pop out of it.
But that's the easy part.
Yes.
I think. I mean, not to discount, what we do here. We are the best, obviously, us 3 at developing deliverables and plans. But of course. But that is the easy part. There's a lot of people who can do that. It's a report. It's a plan. It really is the meat of it is the process. And it matters. It matters to the deliverable. It matters to the output of the product, because if you don't get the process right, there's no people who give a shit about the product, and it doesn't get built, or it's never delivered.
There's outcomes and outputs, and I think outcomes are, have you changed conversations around the systems? Have you empowered people within the systems to make the changes necessary for implementation? Is that part of what's leaving? And that's very difficult to say, well, I've delivered on systems change, because that's a process, right? Sometimes you're in a room and you just asking 2 different questions that they've never been asked before can change whole conversations about things. So that dynamic is hard to pin it. People are like, well, what's the value? How many hours did you spend on a project, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm like, yeah, but I also spent 2 hours walking around this neighborhood with 5 people walking through alleys and poking in the back. Is that less valuable than the piece of paper on the report that I'm sending you? I would say that personable work, that relational work, is far more valuable, because that creates that long-term systematic change. It starts to engage engagement, it can shift POVs, point of view, how that functions. The paper is a mere platform to align language, but then who's saying the language? Who's out there talking that?
Right.
And that's that art and science of the work we do, right? There's an art and science to this stuff. There's indelible models that we can all go back to that every plan has. We understand streets and widths and blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's formulas behind it.
Yeah.
But it's the relational work that's the hardest, that also can't always be quantifiable, that if we don't include in our work, they're just plans.
Yeah.
What's the point, right?
Won't be anything too big.
And it's
Yeah.
ultimately what AI won't replace.
No.
Which is how we're going to start to measure value, I think.
Right, which is scary.
Which is scary.
Which is
So shifting to the doing, away
Yeah.
from AI. That's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down.
Okay. Do you want to play a game?
Now, so you're in Northwest Arkansas.
Yes.
Which is great, a wonderful place. I grew up north of there.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about that. And you've done a lot there. You were an executive director
Of the
there.
Downtown Association in Bentonville and in Fayetteville.
Yeah. You've worked on the master plan of Springdale.
Of Fayetteville, Springdale, Rogers, and the implementation in Bentonville is including the regional plan that kind of merged a lot of those things
Right.
together from a regional perspective.
And now you have really dove into a block or two of development, including the Bauhaus Beer Garden, which I have not been to yet. I'm hoping to get there this year, but it looks really fun via Instagram, so people should follow it. Talk to me a little bit about, I want to hear about the experience of opening that beer garden.
Yeah.
And like the mechanics of that a little bit, but also like this world you've been in for decade plus of thinking systematically about Northwest Arkansas and then getting down to the granular level of rehabbing a building into a beer garden, and talk a little bit about that.
So the process of understanding the context of a project, it's always thinking bigger and then figuring out how that manifests, right? Going through a process of doing it with and for others, executive director of these downtown associations, your job is to facilitate opportunity you're not necessarily doing. You're trying to facilitate this opportunity, because somewhat inappropriate, because you're getting a lot of information that you shouldn't use for personal gain. I mean, it's a part of the ethos of what we do. When I left downtown Bentonville in 2014 and had the opportunity to start my own firm, Velocity Group, I approached it with hey, I still want to help facilitate opportunity with folks, but I actually want to go do, right? That's that do and consult piece. So I started dabbling around in development, looking at some properties around, and I landed in Springdale because it was the last city to really kind of do their downtown master plan in Northwest Arkansas. There's still opportunity for a small developer to really step in and do some things from an affordability standpoint.
So it's the right mix of not quite there yet, but not too risky.
The city folks were really thinking about, okay, we've learned a lot of lessons on how Fayetteville, Rogers, and Bentonville did it, and so there's some interesting lessons to that. So I worked with a firm out of St. Louis called H3 and with the city, and worked with helping to create the organizational structure through this process for the Downtown Springdale Alliance, and so it was very much a lot of systems work. And I just fell in love with a couple buildings, and some of them are really crazy, like really beautiful. One was built in 1947 by a bunch of Germans right after the war, and there was a doctor that did this building. It's this weird Art Deco building. It has not a lick of wood in the whole thing. It's all cinder block, plaster, and concrete. And so when we were actually, and it's an old building, which was also fascinating. So we had to abandon all the services because we couldn't open up the walls. We had to put conduit. I mean, it was a fascinating process from there. Myself and a few partners bought the church right next door, an old church that was built in 1911. It was an old Methodist kit church, right? So it was like a very interesting, we were able to save all the original wood floors and the tin ceilings and convert it back into a usable space, and then bought a little small house with some other partners right behind that and fixed that up, and then did an 1897 house just across the street from there. So there was about a block and a half, and it took me 6.5 years to do this. You want to talk about incremental development, you're like, all right, well, I don't have a liver to sell anymore. It wasn't that valuable in the first place. But you have all of this stuff going through the machinations. And what was really interesting is I was actually testing the plan we put together. We were running the traps on the zoning and what did this mean and how is the process. And I learned a lot through that. It's like the difference between creating the plan and actually doing the plan. And so coming out of that, I've been in the food industry in and out for
Yeah.
years. I was a filmmaker and an actor, and of course, how do you make a living? But in the food industry, not in the actual craft you do, right?
Right.
And so, been fascinated with food. I met my business partner, Chef Jennifer Booker. She had come into a project. I did the 8th Street Market, co-developer of the 8th Street Market in downtown Bentonville, 78,000 square foot rehab building, culinary school, et cetera, et cetera. And so they kept inviting these chefs in, and that's when I met Chef Jennifer Booker out of Atlanta. James Beard connected, and I had some great relationships with the James Beard Foundation in New York, and we kind of got together. She asked me to be her sous chef during 2 events, and I just loved cooking with her. We had a great time. And she was at a place of life, and I was in a place of life where, like, what if we opened up our own place? What do you think about that? I was like, yeah, shit, I got an extra 5 minutes. Why the hell not, right? And so we became a tenant in one of our own buildings and created Bauhaus Biergarten, which is a German, EU-driven beer garden. We don't sell anything domestic, nothing local. It's all EU. And so that we joke, we said, what's the hardest concept to open up in the state of Arkansas? Let's do that. That sounds great. But it's been really fun. We've gotten to know some beautiful German breweries over at Tucher, which is a great brand that we carry. Small brewery just outside of Nuremberg. We're one of the only ones in the state with it. We've been pushing for expanding beer offerings in the state just through our little 900 square foot space. Once again, trying to change whole systems of opening up new offerings in the state and doing what we can, kind of punching above our weight class. Our sausages come from Usinger's, which is, I'm being from Milwaukee, right, is near and dear to my heart, but it's 5 generations, 150 years, same family, right? So everything in the bar has a story, including the garage door was built by a Springdale company. The chairs and tables were donated to us by a dear chef friend down in Fayetteville. Some of the woodwork and stuff were all done by local artisans. And Bauhaus, to us, from unpacking that term, it was very much about art in the everyday, right? Now, there's all kinds of things that come along with Bauhaus, some problematic, some not, but we took the essence of Bauhaus and said, how do we bring this into the everyday? The art of community, the art of usability, that kind of thing. And we took that to heart, and so everything designed in the space has a story, has a purpose, has a place. We've trained our staff to understand the story and to tell the story when they're behind the bar. They're not just pouring beers, they're pouring experiences.
Yeah.
And that's been something near and dear, I think, to both Jennifer and I, Chef Jennifer and I's heart. But when we look at how that manifests in the rest of the work I do in consulting, I mean, this is exactly what we hope communities or projects, and since then I've done other restaurant support, I've done hotel hospitality projects, the whole bit, and we always start with that sort of experience design. How does it make you feel? What does this mean when you walk in? What are those elements that indelibly connect to people?
Right.
And then how do you build systems and projects around a feeling, not let's do a project and then hope someone feels good about it, right? You start with that concept and then you go up from there. And Bauhaus, I think, manifests that, and it's a complete pain in the butt in a very beautiful way, and it's hard, and it's the restaurant business, and you're managing people and brands and everything else, but it's wonderfully complex and difficult work.
Nice.
But it's a giant Tetris puzzle, which is, liking puzzles, which is what we do. We kind of pull all these pieces together and see how they fit.
Yeah.
It's just a microcosm of the bigger work that we do. Yeah.
Have you been able to catch your breath and just kind of observe it all?
Not as much as I'd like.
It's important.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you're pulling 60, 80-hour weeks and you're blowing and going, and I've got projects all over North America and doing stuff and things like this, and then still trying to be a good husband and a reasonably decent father and all that kind of stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of balance to that. And that's part of the personal side of all this. And I think this is interesting, is this isn't work necessarily. I don't go into an office and do my 9 to 5 and leave, and on the weekends we get to go hang out with the kids on the bar. I mean, this is, I don't know, it's not as deep as a calling, but there's a why behind all this, right? And so
there has to be, if you're putting up that much effort and stress and eye twitching.
When we talk about raising kids and how that works, it's like how you do your home, how you do your family is how you do your work and work with clients. And I mean, it's not a separation of POV. You are what you are, and it manifests
I invoice
everywhere.
my children.
Oh, that's
all
good.
the time.
I use them as a tax write-off.
They don't
so
pay
it
them.
all works, right?
Are there 2 or 3 things that come to mind that you would that you learned going through the incremental development experience that you think cities should keep front of mind?
Well, I'll tell you this
to
much.
help it ease the pain of it a little
Well,
bit?
it is brutally difficult. I don't care how much you grease the skids from a planning perspective, you're going to run into some
Especially
rub.
adaptive reuse.
Oh, you're going to run in some rub, whether it's a bank conversation or you don't find tenants for the first 3 months, and then you got to figure out how to just make note and do whatever. And I think it's complicated, and you're dealing with multiple departments that you have to code switch on. You got to do that, and at the same time, you got banks on you, and then you have to come up with it. So it's very complicated, no matter how much training you get with the great programs like InkDev and some of those other things that we talk about here.
Yeah,
at
there's only
CNU.
so much you can do.
Until you go do,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing with restaurants. It was the same thing with pretty much anything.
Yeah.
On paper, it looks sexy. And then you go do it, and running a restaurant.
And there's really no
doing
money in it. I mean, I think that's the reality. I mean, maybe it's a potential wealth builder, in 20 years when the building's paid off or something.
Yeah.
Maybe you sell it and it's something. But we were talking before this, you're kind of like us in the sense that we have the yard side of things, the consulting side, which keeps the cash flow going, supports some of this. But the incremental development, it's not paying your salary.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no. Neither is the restaurant. Neither is
even when you do a block and a half. I mean, so.
Yeah.
We've been doing the garage over in Dayton that we own.
Yeah,
That
great little space.
Yeah, great.
It's a cool building.
It's a cool space, and we're building it out for a coffee tenant. And what I've really been loving about that is kind of what you touched on, is these incremental, really small decisions that you end up making. That when I first started building this out with the coffee tenant, I would just kind of say, just pick that out, to the construction, the GC or whatever. And I started to learn pretty quickly. It's like, no, I need to pay attention to like some real important details about the experience you said of like coming into the place and how it is going to make you feel. And we have a good partner that's helping with that too. But then again, last night, we got the new garage door put in on the garage, and then the second it got put in, we got a stop order from the county building inspector.
Yep.
And that was something we worked out this morning. But it's like it's all these little things. There's not. There are things that could be done on a systems level, but some stuff it's learning.
You can't
learning through pain.
Yeah, and that's the only way to do it half the time, right? You've got to be able to go do it. I mean, we talk about the intentionality of design and how important that is. Like when you first walk into the bar, when we were having conversations of men and women's bathroom, do we do every one bathroom? Do we do men and women's bathroom? What do we put in them? Do we do a change table here? What should it be in both? What does this mean if we're truly family friendly? Like the intentionality of just bathroom conversations, right? And so instead of putting men and women on it, there's a picture of me when I was 4 years old in Lederhosen, and that's the men's bathroom door. So people come in and they go, and so it's funny, where's the men's bathroom? And I tell people to walk through the ginger, and they're like, what? And then I turn the corner, there I am, full redhead on the door, and they walk through the ginger to go to the bathroom. And then Chef Jennifer is in a drindle she's probably 5 or 6 years old, and that's the women's bathroom. And then my mom found the Lederhosen from what I was wearing in this picture when I was 3, and we actually nailed it to the wall right next door to the bathroom.
I'm so glad you said that and not that you tried to squeeze in.
No, that would be in a very inappropriate Coyote Ugly moment. Like I was thinking of jumping up on the bar and seeing if we would chase customers away, I think, at that point. But it's that little intentionality. There was a night.
That only happens when the owners of the place and the designers of the place are truly closely kind of
or are the
connected to
designers.
it. Yeah,
I didn't have any designers.
Right,
but even down to little moments of capturing those things, which I know you guys do so well, seeing your body of work, but there was a night, it was cold, we maybe had 5 people in the place, and because unlike Wisconsin, it snows half an inch and people go get milk and bread and stay home, right, down in Arkansas. And so it was a quiet place, and all of a sudden a bunch of people showed up, and I will tell you, there was Japanese and Korean dudes that walked in. There was a group from Argentina. There's a couple people that were speaking German. So we had like 3 or 4 languages being talked in this small space, plus a bunch of people from Springdale. And they all came in. I don't know where they were coming from, but it was this incredibly, incredibly cool moment of sitting behind the bar, listening to this symphony of different languages in a really small space. And it felt so warm and real. It just made sense, right? It was one of those nights where you just looked at a project you were participating in and was like, oh, this is it. This is why we do what we do. And so the next day I ordered a giant map and we put it up on the wall with pins. And anytime someone comes in, they pin where they are. We've had over 35 countries over 160 cities, wander through this little bar in downtown Springdale.
You think that's driven by Walton being there, that they get that international audience? Or
No, I mean, from a regional
draws
perspective,
that?
I mean, there's some major corporations in this space, but Springdale also has one of the largest Marshallese populations outside the Marshall Islands. You have a very incredibly growing, dynamic Latino population from all over that world, right? And so that's reflected. A lot of international travelers and folks from all over the country. I mean, we get people coming in from Kansas City to our place. We get people coming in from Tulsa from our place, right? And so it's been
become an
an epicenter, right? It's become a epicenter of this community thing, and we're now capturing it. And guess what? The map cost me $25-$30. And how expensive are the pins? So this is the other thing to tell people. It's like everything on experience does not have to cost thousands of dollars. Sometimes it's little incremental things.
Yeah, we had a similar, I texted this to Joe, but we built out this office and had a vision for how people would use it and experience it. And over the last couple of days, we've had some CNU related, Strong Towns related conversations going on in the different kind of corners and nooks and crannies. And I took a video yesterday. It was like 4 or 5 conversations going on throughout with a really diverse group of people and talking about community work. And it was like the visual come to life, and it was very fulfilling. Speaking of CNU, I got to go give a bus tour in a minute.
Okay.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
no
doing
worries.
this. Any final thoughts?
Well, just to connect Daniel's story, listening to it, and where we're sitting now, you were talking about the Bauhaus and being intentional about threads that could come out of that and inform your design. And I'm thinking about the space we're sitting in and the conversations we had. Our starting point with the Bauhaus was very different. The kind of cool stone, brick, concrete vibe of this space was the starting point for that. But hearing you describe what attracted you to it, I think subliminally was what we liked about it, messaging here. I mean, the art of the everyday building and doing and crafting. That's what we're trying to embody here. I think that's what your firm embodies. That's what Yard is all about. The art and spirit of the everyday is really cool, and that's what makes cities great and neighborhoods great.
And getting back to a point where people aren't just in their lane of architecture or design or engineering, that everybody has something to contribute to those spaces, no matter who you are, even if you're not trained as an architect or trained as an engineer. And when you do a space like this in Bauhaus and in the garage, you sort of start to see that everybody can contribute to these things. And that's how these places were originally built. It wasn't just one expert coming in and designing and building it, and then you shove something in it. It was all, it came together to do it as together, collaboratively.
That word expert gives me heartburn.
Yeah.
Because there's a stopping point to that. Like, I've arrived.
Are you sure it's the word expert and not all the German food that you're eating?
Yes, that's true. By the way, once again, the culinary exploration we've already started here in Cincinnati remains awesome. Like, it's so fun to see these things. But the word expert always has been challenging to that, because there's a certain end, like, I'm done. Right? And the work we do, we talked about the necessity of insatiable curiosity. And so our job is to just add capacity to the collective wisdom of the projects that we're a part of, and that's why we're there, is to add capacity to the conversation and bring our own experiences in that. When you think about that, there's a beautiful collective wisdom that comes out of projects like this. And then getting back to, there's a hardware and software to great places, right? And you have people that focus just on the hardware, and they go, well, why isn't it working? Or people that just focus on the ephemeral software piece. It's like, why isn't it working? And placemaking and the work we do, as a beautiful Venn diagram, the work exists between the intersection of hardware and software, right? But think about a computer that doesn't have software. It's just a really expensive paperweight, right? And it's the same thing with, with if it doesn't plug in and you don't update the software every once in a while, you get viruses, you get all that. I mean, cities, communities, projects are the exact same way. You have to upgrade the hardware on occasion, right? But it's the software that constantly is updated and keeps you up to terms. And those communities that sit there, or a project that sits there that never addresses its software within the thing, becomes stale. Same menu, same things, same experience. People get bored and they wander off.
So it needs to be adaptable. Yeah.
So there's this constant, every couple years you get a new computer because you have to. Well, it's the same thing with buildings. You paint, you do something, but every couple weeks, sometimes every couple months, you're upgrading, you've got new viruses, you do that kind of thing. So to me, that's a great metaphor for the work we do, that intersection of the hardware and software, and you have to straddle both.
Well, when we even, not to get off on another podcast topic, because that's really what this is, but we've even added a third element to that and that we're passionate about, and it's not just the hardware, software, but the community operating system that makes it all run.
Yep.
The apps are just the different things we install and uninstall and update, but the community operating system that makes it work and run on the hardware is a thing that virtually nobody acknowledges in a planning process or something.
And really, this has been, to leave it with that, because I know you got to bounce, but that's the part that I think we've resonated with for so long in different languages. But since COVID, honestly, showing the massive flaws in just our systems, right, that came out of COVID, I pivoted, I started to see that, but really COVID came into it. I am doing a lot more systems work than just straight planning, like working with people in the systems to say, how do you solicit change in this? How do we broker relationships to actually move the needle? And that's taking it from, I've developed a plan, here you go. The best idea in the world won't function in a system that's septic to the idea. And if we don't address these systems issues, and that they're very real systems, I'm not talking about the massive behemoth issues of systematic racism, which is a part of this conversation, but the stuff that we deal with are how people work with each other. Right?
It's just
as the executive director and the board, how do you strengthen that relationship? And those subtle changes can help implementation. That's, I think, the next frontier of this work, is systems work, which then sets the platform for all the other plans and the work that we're doing. And I think over the next 5, 10, 15 years, we're going to see vast amounts of folks begin to focus on that as part of this process. And hopefully CNU, ULI, a lot of these other organizations start to recognize the importance of that work and not as a sidebar conversation, on a Saturday workshop at 5 o'clock when everybody's out, but as actually a centerpiece to who and what we do as our work.
Yeah, you got to be able to pivot quickly.
Yeah.
And COVID was a good example of those who couldn't and those who could.
That's right. That's right.
So I agree.
Thank God for therapists.
Yeah. Right. Speaking of, thank you for being on our couch.
Yes, I appreciate it.
No, it was good. All right, I'm gonna go give a bus tour.
Okay.
I'll see you at the pub crawl.
Yes, you will.
Maybe.
Where does that start?
Yeah, where does it start?
At a bar.
At a
somewhere.
pub.
Okay, I'll write that down.
Okay.
We can just start
that
our
in
own
mind.
and
We
maybe
can make a
connect up
calendar
with them.
invite to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Great.
Thanks,
All right.
guys. I appreciate
Great to see
the
you again.
invitation. You
All
too.
right, talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.